how's it going, guys? It's Geoff Chrysler, a detail enthusiast, back with your next episode of my BN1 Austin Healey restoration. And here she is this week. A number of new things added. I put in the radiator and I completely installed the exhaust system. That was a bear of a job, but we got her in and got the Rad Hoses on. Those are my textured hoses that I made up with the correct style band clamps on there. And yeah, she's looking really good. You'll notice I've removed the fresh air hose here. I have another one on order. I've decided I am going to go for the correct early BN1 style. Even though I found evidence of the paper one, I've been studying my photos and I'm really not convinced that that was my original one. I think it may have been changed out at some point for the paper one because there was a lot of modifications done to that area on the firewall. Those toe boxes had been cut open and little things like that lead me to believe that might not be original to the car. So all the rest of the specs and the evidence we have of other cars of this time period has the oilcloth style of air hose. I've found one online that looks to be, from the photos, a better match than any of the ones I've seen. I actually got it from like a heating and cooling company, so it's on its way here. We'll see how it looks. Otherwise, there is one available through SC Parts that's designed for an MGA twin cam. I've seen that one before. It has a bit of a texture that I don't really like, but we'll see. We'll compare and see which one I'm going to use. So I've got the Rad installed here, and I've gone along and touched in the fastener hardware with body color, as it should be, for those brackets. And I'm just about to insert the temperature gauge. And you can see I've got a little copper washer here. Don't lose that. That's my original one. So you just slide that on there. And slide that in there. And I can tighten that up. And of course, this will be going up along the outside edge of the bonnet opening with a series of clips. So that's a big step. The radiator's in. So you can barely see the brackets down there. Painted black. All of these ones done in the body color. So looking really good. And as with many things on the Healey 100s, the end of the capillary tube here that goes into the rad was hand painted black. So it's not shiny brass standing out at you. Yeah, it seems at the factory they had a guy go along with a little tin of black paint and with body color paint and hand painted a lot of little things to mute them down. Well, even things like these pipes were hand painted silver. Even though they're brass. Donald Healey wanted things to look a certain way. So, just about to install the Rad Hoses. If you remember from my recap video, these are Napa Rad Hoses that I purchased that are the right curvature, and they were longer. I've just now cut them on my bandsaw to the correct length, and the one size does both hoses. You just it's the same radius, and they started out being this long on both ends. And anyway, I wrapped these in a cloth fabric that I put on with rubber cement, and then sprayed them with a liquid rubber coating to make it all unified texture. And here are the correct early style band clamps, rad clamps that you can get these from Clark's Spares. And yeah, we'll go about installing these now. So another thing I like to use is just a little smear of this sill glide, which is safe for rubber. I just smear a little bit along the inside edge so that they are easier to push on, because they're very tight, especially onto the thermostat housing. That was really tight. I had to use a bit of grease there. So yeah, use it sparingly. Of course, that one there is going to be really tight as well, so a little bit of grease goes a long way. So also this week I've installed my speedometer and tachometer cables. So there you can see the tachometer cable as it attaches to, there's a little thing on the side of the block there, and the cable comes back through the firewall and goes up through that wiring clip that also holds the speedometer cable here. Speedometer cable comes down and attaches to the side of the gearbox. Of course, the cables come up through the firewall. You can see them both coming up here and into the back of the gauges. So yeah, those are my original cables that I thoroughly flushed out, cleaned them out with Varsol, and poured a little bit of oil in them, but not much. You gotta be really sparing with them. You don't, like I say, you don't want it to come out into the gauge and start collecting in the gauge. And actually, when I got my gauges back from Nissinger's, who rebuilt them, they sent a little tag that warned of there was lots of oil found in my gauges because they weren't sealed properly. So it seems to be a common issue. Anyways, so also today I completely installed the exhaust, and it's a bear of a job getting it all lined up and fitting correctly, but we got her there. So it's kind of hard to see here, but bolts up, this downpipe bolts up to the manifold there, and there's this bracket that comes off of the block. One of the oil pan bolts is extra long and secures this little L bracket. It's like a stay bracket. It's kind of hard to see. There it is. Anyway, and so you got a U-bolt there, and then under the car she goes, and there's some mounts along here. There's a little flat clamp there to join the muffler. And along here, there's another one right there to join the tailpipe. And of course, you've got, there's your exhaust mount right there. All finished in black with the black phosphate fasteners. Here's the rear exhaust mount, and with the little tilt right under where the shroud does up, and coming out with the vertical. And of course, this is a brand new stainless exhaust that I scuffed it up with some Scotch-Brite and then painted it in a satin black finish. It's like a high heat barbecue paint. So yeah, the exhaust completely installed. So also today I've been going around and greasing all of the grease nipples around the car. I've filled up my grease gun with some nice lightweight grease for the suspension, and just going along, and all of the nipples, you just plug on the end of the grease gun and fill it until you can see a little bit of swelling or grease coming out of the nipple where it won't take anymore. And yeah, there's a whole bunch on the front suspension here. I think it's like 5 on each side, plus of course the steering box and the idler assembly, which I did in the Dynalite. Yeah, and you just work your way back, and then as you work your way back here, here you can see the pedal linkage. That took a lot to fill that, because you got to fill the entire tube so it lubricates all the pedals. And again, just keep pumping it until I saw little bits of it oozing out of the joints all along the way, and then it started coming out of where the grease gun was here. So, and there's no more you can put in. And then working your way back. You can see you've also got grease fittings on the drive shaft. There's 3 of them on the drive shaft, 1 in each of the universal joints, and also 1 here for this slide joint. And here's the rear universal joint. And of course, also back in here, there's your the grease joint for the emergency brake mechanism. So there's 1 there. And there will be 1 going in the emergency brake cable. You can see it's just down there beyond the shock. I'll probably be using a thick oil for the actual cable rather than suspension grease. And of course down on the gearbox you've got 1 right there for the clutch throw link. And coming to the rear of the car, not to be forgotten is the pair of grease joints for these rear spring shackles. You can see they stick out the back here, and that greases that whole shackle joint. So just going about filling the steering column and idler box assemblies with some fresh Dynalite lube that's made specially for steering boxes and that. You can get this from any number of places. I actually ordered mine through Moss Motors with my last order with them. And anyway, the tricky part is getting it into the thing. So what I've done, I've got an old squeeze bottle. I cut the very tip off and I'm just using it like a syringe and drawing it up from here and then plugging the end into the steering box here. You can see here's the little access. So you can see a lot of steering boxes have the fill plug on the top, but my early box here has it at the top, but just over here on the side. So a little bit different. And that's it. So steering box is all full now. Wipe away the excess and put the filler plug back in. And of course the idler box doesn't take much lube at all. I've already filled it just with that little square fill plug on the top. So continuing on with the lubrication, my gearbox and overdrive was all rebuilt by our specialist here, Tom Monroe, and he even filled it with some fresh oil, and he used HD 30 weight oil for the gearbox. So that was a Castrol product, the HD 30. And of course I filled up the rear axle with some 75-90 weight oil, gear oil. So that's for those. And for the engine, I've ordered in some of the Valvoline 20W50 VR1 racing oil. Seems to be about the best oil on the market for these early tappet engines. It's got a really high zinc content, and a lot of classic car owners swear by the stuff, so that's what we'll be putting into it. Of course, it's a freshly rebuilt engine, so we want to treat her really kindly. And yeah, and so as well as all the grease joints, there's also lots of areas to be lubricated with an oil can. So all of your carburetor linkage, of course for the dash pots, I've got some of the proper SU oil. I think it's like a 20 weight oil, something like that, but you can buy it from Moss Motors or any of the big sources, and it comes in a little SU bottle. It's specially made for SU carburetors. And yeah, basically anything that moves, you want to give a little bit of lubrication with your oil can, and that's all covered in the factory workshop manual and owner's handbook. All of the little spots that you should lubricate. Of course, the handbrake itself, you want to give it a little squirt in the linkage here, and just so everything's nice and smooth running. And and a little bit goes a long way. And of course, for the brake fluid, I'm going to be filling it with some fresh silicone brake fluid. I've given the brake system a complete overhaul, so there's all new brake lines and everything has been thoroughly cleaned and flushed out. Basically everything's new, the wheel cylinders and all the lines. The reservoir has been properly cleaned, so yeah, at this point we can change it over to the silicone brake fluid, which today's silicone brake fluid is much better than yesterday's, and of course it's safe on paint for the bleeding process. You don't have to worry about stripping it all, and should be good to go there. So that's all this week. Next week, hopefully we'll have that air hose installed and go through getting her ready for starting. Anyway, that's all for this week. Until next week, I'm Geoff Chrysler, a detail enthusiast. We'll see you next time.